Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. All eyes will be on New Orleans for Monday's national championship matchup between Clemson and LSU. But you may want to shift your attention to Frisco, Texas on Saturday, as we have another huge national championship game, this time between number 2 James Madison and number 1 North Dakota State out of the FCS. And I know many will be quick to say, why should I even care about this game? I don't pay attention to the FCS. I've never watched James Madison or North Dakota State, so why should I watch them now? Why should I care and pay attention to this game now? The first reason is that this national championship game may be one of the better ones we have seen in FCS history. It is going to be an absolute dogfight between the absolute 2 best teams in the football championship subdivision this season and has been for the majority of this decade. Secondly, it is the second to last college football game of the year. It is the second to last college football game for nearly 8 months. You have this game, and then you have the FBS National Championship on Monday, and that's it. So you need to soak it in while you can. And it's going to be a good one to soak in. And then finally, both James Madison and North Dakota State could probably go out there right now and beat the majority of your teams. That's how good these guys are. That's how good James Madison and North Dakota State are. So even though they are at the FCS level, they can compete at the FBS level. And we have seen that in their fair share of upsets that they have been able to pull off over not just this past decade, but in their program's history as well. When you think of the FCS, the first team that you probably do think of is North Dakota State. They have been the team that has been mostly associated with some of the bigger upsets we've seen from the FCS over FBS teams. They've also been like the Alabama of the FBS when it comes to winning championships. Alabama has kind of been the team of this decade. From 2010 to 2020 or through 2019, it was kind of Alabama's decade. The same can be said for the Bison of North Dakota State, who have won 7 national championships since 2011. 7 national championships since 2011. That's 7 of the past 8 national titles for the Bison. That is unheard of, guys. I don't care what level you're playing at, FBS, FCS, NAIA, I don't care what it is. That is impressive and unheard of. And they're doing it this year under a first-year head coach in Matt Entz, who took over for Chris Klieman, who, as we all know, left North Dakota State to take the Kansas State head coaching job, where he did a phenomenal job in his first year in Manhattan. But the Bison, since 2011, are 117-8. So they have a 117-8 record to go along with those 7 national championships. They're 15-0 this year, and they're looking to make it 8 of the past 9 years they have clinched and hoisted that national championship trophy. For James Madison, the Dukes, they are also led by a first-year head coach this year in Curt Cignetti, who took over for Mike Houston, who left James Madison last year to take over at East Carolina. But Houston, during his time with the Dukes, did win a national championship back in 2016 and had a chance to do so again in 2017 against North Dakota State, where they fell 17-13. So these two teams, as dominant as they have been over the past decade, have met in the national championship before, the Bison getting the best of the Dukes in that first matchup. But James Madison, they're 14-1, the only loss this season coming in the season opener to West Virginia, and that was just a 20-13 loss. So they really held their own in that game against Neil Brown in a Big 12 Power 5 program. So this is an elite James Madison squad looking to kind of get their national championship, get a national championship for the first time in about 3 or 4 years, and pulling off an upset even though they are slightly favored. So before we jump too deep into this analysis, there are a couple things that we need to address. Before we start breaking down the offensive and the defensive side of the ball, the first thing we have to look at, or that I want to look at, is the Sagarin ratings for North Dakota State and James Madison. You know, we mentioned at the beginning of this video that both the Dukes and the Bison could go out and beat a lot of FBS schools. A lot of maybe you, the viewer, maybe your school, maybe your team that you support, they could probably go out and beat. And you look at North Dakota State, they are 36 when it comes to the Gridiron ratings. And if you don't know what those are, you need to go check those out. Some brilliant metrics used for practically all these college football programs, both in the FBS and FCS. But the Bison, ranking at 36 above teams like Tennessee, Arizona State, North Carolina, and California, all teams that not only made the postseason this year, but won their respective bowl games. So something to watch out for. I'm not saying that every Saturday North Dakota State could go out and beat those teams, but I'm saying if you put them out on a neutral site, I wouldn't expect the Bison to roll over and just get annihilated. For James Madison, they are 50th in the Gridiron rating, so right behind North Dakota State, and the Dukes above teams like Louisville, South Carolina, Florida State, and Miami. So these two teams know how to compete. They play extremely well. Once again, just because you're in the FCS does not mean you can't compete at the FBS. Does not mean that you can't thrive at an FBS level. We're not saying they're going to go play every game in the SEC or the Big Ten or a Power 5 school. But a great example of a team like that is Appalachian State, who thrived as an FCS program, jumped up to the Sun Belt, and has never looked back. Continuously wins 9, 10, 11 games, continuously competes in that Sun Belt Conference, and from time to time has been known to either upset elite Power 5 opponents or at least take them down to the wire. So when you look at this offense for both teams, North Dakota State and James Madison, they're both extremely balanced. They're both extremely balanced and extremely tough to stop. The reason that these two teams have a combined record of 29-1 this season. And we'll start with the Bison here. You can go back and look at some of the great quarterbacks that have come through North Dakota State. We've got Carson Wentz, who is the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles now. We have Easton Stick, who got drafted to the NFL last year. And another name you can go ahead and add to the list of great Bison quarterbacks is freshman Trey Lance. It's unbelievable the numbers that he's putting up for North Dakota State this season. He's just a freshman, yet he's completing 67% of his passes, has over 2,700 passing yards, and he's dangerous on the ground as well. 934 rushing yards. Combined, he has 41 total touchdowns. He has been the leader of this North Dakota State football team. He's been the leader of this offense. A major reason they are 15-0 right now. But the one thing that's more impressive to me from Trey Lance is not the numbers that he's putting up, not the over 2,700 passing yards, the 41 touchdowns. To me, it's the fact that he takes extremely good care of the football and that he has yet to throw an interception this season. He's played in 15 games and has yet to throw a single interception, only has one turnover this season. That was a fumble all the way back in the season opener, a game that North Dakota State ran away with. Just annihilated, I believe it was Butler in that season opener. So, Lance doing a phenomenal job of taking care of the football. Knock on wood, he continues to thrive taking care of the football. It would be unbelievable to see a quarterback go 16 games, an entire NFL regular season, without throwing a single interception. But the Bison, they're averaging 37.7 points per game. They lead the FCS with 7.4 yards per play. They're getting close to getting a first down every time they run a play. They're fourth in the FCS when it comes to their rushing game. 288 rushing yards per game, led by Ty Brooks, who's averaging 7.2 yards per carry, 940 yards, and 5 touchdowns on the year. So this North Dakota State offense is extremely difficult to stop. Plain and simple. You take away the run, Trey Lance is going to beat you on the ground himself, but he can beat you through the air. If you slow down Trey Lance through the air, he can beat you on the ground, and then he can hand off to Brooks and their running backs and beat you on the ground as well. So they are extremely balanced, and that has served the Bison extremely well this season. A major reason they're 15-0. For James Madison, they are actually a little bit better offensively. I know that's kind of hard to believe after everything we just said about the Bison, but they're averaging 41.3 points per game. So that's up there as not only one of the better marks in the FCS, but one of the best marks in all of college football. Because keep in mind, I believe the best offense in all of college football is LSU, and they're averaging, what, about 48 points per game? So a little under a touchdown less than that for the Dukes in the FCS. And they are led by not only a great ground game that ranks 10th in the FCS with 248.3 rushing yards per game, but the guy that I look at more than anybody else is once again the quarterback, and this time it's Ben DiNucci, who transferred from Pittsburgh back in 2018. His first year with James Madison was in 2018, and he has thrived since he arrived to the program. This year, more so than ever, his final year of eligibility, completing 71% of his passes for over 3,200 yards, and like Trey Lance, does a phenomenal job of taking care of the football. 27 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions, and he's added 560 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. So maybe not as great of a dual threat quarterback as Trey Lance, but once again, when you're putting up over 500 yards on the ground to go with over 3,000 yards passing, that's pretty dang good. And for me as a defensive coordinator, that makes me say, okay, he hasn't just gotten lucky on a few breaks, he can run the football. So DiNucci, final game of his career, you guarantee he wants to go out with a national championship to his name after a phenomenal 2019 season. So we mentioned all these offensive stats, guys. You would expect some major offensive fireworks, and that's the type of games I love to see. I love to see shootouts. I love to see teams just trading scores all the way up until the end. The thing is, both these teams have elite defenses that probably won't even let that happen. There's a reason that North Dakota State and James Madison have been the #1 and #2 teams in the country all season long. Since the season began to now, they have been #1 and #2. There is a reason for that, and that's not just because of their offense, but it's more so because of their defense. And once again, we'll start with the Bison here. They have the #2 defense in the FCS. #2 defense in the FCS, allowing just 11.8 points per game. So that's less than 2 touchdowns per game. And their strength has been taking away the pass. Their strength has been forcing teams to win the game on the ground, as the Bison are allowing just 134.3 passing yards per game. So their key in this one is going to be shut down Ben DiNucci and force James Madison to win this game on the ground. Now, of course, DiNucci can run. Maybe not as powerful and as strong as Trey Lance, but he can. And then, of course, we know that the Dukes have the 10th best rushing offense in the entire championship subdivision, so that's something that the Bison are going to have to look out for as well. For the Dukes, they are just, once again, right behind the Bison, the 3rd best defense in the FCS, allowing just 14.8 points per game. 3 points separate the average amount of points that these two teams are allowing. Just 3 points separate them. But the key for James Madison, North Dakota State shuts you down on the pass. They shut you down on the run. The Dukes own the #1 rushing defense in the FCS. The best rushing defense, allowing just an insane 61.1 rushing yards per game. Once again, I don't care what level you're at. I don't care if you're at the FBS level, the FCS, the NAIA, your AAA. I don't care what it is. 1 AAA, whatever it is, I don't care. 61.1 rushing yards per game is absolutely ridiculous. And that's going to be what James Madison tries to rely on in this game, and they're going to have to do that once again, taking away a North Dakota State rushing offense that's averaging nearly 300 rushing yards per game. So they've got to slow that down. And that's the storyline that we've been following over the course of hundreds of games this season. You know, something's got to give. Will the Bison continue to have their way on the ground, or will the defense finally step up and force Trey Lance, just a freshman, to win this game in the biggest game of his career so far? Something has got to give, and that's the thing to watch out for the most in this game. So who do we have winning the FCS National Championship, guys? A game that you need to watch. I'm telling you, this is a game that you have to watch. There's not much going on Saturday. You've got some NFL playoffs going on, sure. I know everybody's getting excited for Clemson and LSU, but I guarantee you this game can be just as good, if not better, than the FBS National Championship. So who are we going with? You look at James Madison. This is a team that has dominated all season long. They're 14-1. They're #2. They're right behind North Dakota State. You kind of look at James Madison as being the little brother in this matchup, because North Dakota State has been the dynasty of the entire FCS, this entire decade. 7 of the past 8 national titles have gone to the Bison, and James Madison's been up there. They have been solid. They have been really, really good. Just not good enough, only clinching that 1 national title. This year feels like it could be different. They've dominated all season long. Outside of that loss to West Virginia, only 1 game was decided by 1 possession, and that was a 7-point overtime victory over Stony Brook. So we know that this is going to be the toughest test for either team this season. We know that North Dakota State is going to be the toughest test for James Madison and vice versa. North Dakota State, they've scored 35 points or more in 10 of their 15 games this season, but they did have 2 games decided by 1 possession, one of them coming in the playoffs to Illinois State, only beating them by 6, and then, of course, beating South Dakota State, with College Game Day in attendance, only beating them by 7. So, you can look at that as a positive and a negative, saying that North Dakota State has experience winning close games. They know how to close things out, maybe more so than James Madison has had to deal with. But you could also look at that as a negative and say they've been in some close games. They've struggled to move the ball like they did against Illinois State. They've struggled to get some offense going in a handful of their games. They've either put up 40 or 50 points, or they've hovered somewhere around the 17 to 25 mark. That's what you're going to get out of North Dakota State. You question which team's going to show up down in Frisco. So having said all of that, we said James Madison's kind of been like a little brother. Is it time to pass the torch? Is it time to maybe show that James Madison has what it takes to finally upend the Bison, to finally win a national championship? They met back in 2017. North Dakota State beat them. Can they maybe upend the Bison this year? Can they finally take over? And we're saying no. We're saying no, that North Dakota State is going to win yet another national championship. And I know people might freak out about that, but listen to this. For the first time since 2016, the North Dakota State Bison are underdogs. James Madison is the slight favorite down in Frisco, and the last time North Dakota State was an underdog was back in 2016 when they faced off against number 13 Iowa. And we all know how that game ended. The Bison went into Kinnick Stadium and upset the Hawkeyes. So that's an interesting storyline to follow here. But I'm not ready to give it up yet. I'm not ready for North Dakota State to kind of relinquish their throne to the Dukes of James Madison. The James Madison run defense is truly amazing, but my concern is this. They can shut down the running backs. They can shut down North Dakota State in the running game, handing it off, pitching it out, but can they stop Trey Lance? Because Trey Lance can do it all. Trey Lance can beat you with his legs, which is something that James Madison has to account for. Probably a test they really haven't faced much this season with such a great dual threat quarterback. And Trey Lance can beat you through the air going up against a James Madison defense that allows 202.5 passing yards per game. I like the Bison in an absolute dogfight. It's not time for them to relinquish their throne quite yet. James Madison's getting there. The future looking very bright for both these programs. The 2 best teams in the FCS for practically this entire decade. 2 brand new head coaches that, if they do stick around for a while, are going to probably meet up multiple times in this national championship game. But for 2020, North Dakota State upends the Dukes in an absolute dogfight, an absolute thriller, and clinches their 8th national title in the past 9 years. And once again, I don't care what level you're playing at, that is practically unheard of and truly unbelievable. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to like this video and check out everything we have for you in the description below. We've got exclusive college football content and offers, not just for the remainder of this season, we're running out of time, but going into next season as well, that I promise you do not want to miss. So check it all out. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.